My wife cheated my trust, and threw coffee in my face, when I refused to fund her irresponsible brother. Across from me stood Julia, my wife, her posture rigid, arms crossed, her eyes blazing with frustration. That seemed ready to boil over. Her voice shattered the silence, sharp and commanding. "Mark, I'm not going to repeat myself. David needs help, and you're being absolutely selfish." I took a long breath, placing my coffee cup down carefully. "Julia, we've been over this. It's not about being selfish, it's about priorities. David has leaned on us too much. And it's time he starts taking responsibility for his own actions." Julia's jaw tightened, her lips pressed into a thin line. "He's my brother," she snapped, her tone rising. "Family supports family. That's what we vowed when we got married. Family also learns to stand on their own 2 feet, I countered, my voice calm but firm. I wasn't trying to escalate things, but I couldn't back down either. We've bailed David out of more situations than I can count. He has to learn to handle his problems, without dragging us down with him." Julia stepped closer, the chair across from me squealing, as she pulled it out and sat down abruptly. Her face was set like stone, her piercing gaze locking onto mine. "You don't get it, do you?" she said, her voice low but trembling, with barely restrained anger. "You've never had siblings, so you can't understand. You don't know what it means to be there for someone no matter what." Her words stung, but I forced myself to remain composed. "You're right, Julia, I don't have siblings," I said evenly, "but that doesn't mean I don't understand. Responsibility, and right now, my responsibility is to us, to our finances, to our future. I can't keep giving, when it's clear David has no intention of changing." The silence that followed was suffocating. I could see the fury building behind her eyes, her hands gripping the edge of the table, as though holding herself back. Then, without warning, she grabbed her coffee cup, and hurled its contents at me. Time seemed to slow. The dark liquid arched through the air, and before I could react, it hit me full in the face. The scalding heat seared my skin, and I gasped, the shock hitting me harder than the pain. The mug clattered onto the table, its sharp sound echoing in the otherwise silent kitchen. For a moment, all I could do was sit there, stunned. My face burned, my shirt was soaked, and my hands trembled slightly, as I reached for a napkin to dab at the stinging liquid. Julia stood frozen, her own expression a mix of anger, and something that looked almost like regret. But it was fleeting. Her lips parted, as though she wanted to say something, but she didn't. Finally, I broke the silence. "What the hell, Julia?" My voice was low, quiet even, but the weight of my disbelief carried more force than if I'd shouted. "You pushed me, Mark," she said, her tone defensive, though there was a hint of unease in her voice. "I didn't mean to." "No," I cut her off, standing slowly. "You meant it, you were angry. And you meant every bit of this." I gestured to my soaked shirt and red skin. "This isn't just about David. This is about control, about you thinking you can manipulate me into doing what you want, no matter how it affects me. Or us." Julia's expression hardened again, the moment of hesitation gone. "You're being dramatic," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "It's just coffee." "You're acting like I threw something at me," I interrupted, "because that's exactly what you did, Julia. And don't you dare minimize it." For the first time, I saw something shift in her expression, not guilt, not apology. Something closer to defiance. "If you just agreed to help David, none of this would have happened," she said, her voice rising again. "This is on you, Mark." I stared at her, my mind racing. Was this who she had always been? Had I ignored the signs, written off the red flags as stress, or passion, or love, or had things changed so gradually that I didn't notice until now? "I think we're done here," I said finally, my voice flat. "I need some air." Without waiting for a response, I turned and walked out of the kitchen. The morning sunlight, once so inviting, now felt like a cruel mockery of what should have been, as I headed for the bathroom to wash the coffee. From my face, one thought echoed in my mind: this isn't just about breakfast, this is about everything. I stood in the bathroom, staring into the mirror, as cold water ran over my face, my skin still tingled. Where the coffee had burned, the redness a stark reminder of what had just happened. It wasn't just the physical sting. that lingered, it was the deeper realization that something fundamental in my marriage had cracked, maybe beyond repair. I shut off the tap and leaned heavily on the sink, letting the water drip from my chin. My reflection stared back at me. Tired and worn, with dark circles under my eyes that hadn't been there a few years ago. How had I gotten here? When had Julia become someone who could throw coffee in my face during an argument? Or maybe the real question was, when did I stop recognizing the woman I married as the cool air from the vent hit my damp skin? Memories began to swirl in my mind. I remembered our early days, Julia and I laughing over burnt dinners in our first tiny apartment, staying up late talking about our dreams, or teasing me about my obsession with organizing the ice rack. Those moments seem so far away now, like they belonged to a different lifetime. Back then, we were a team. We had each other's backs, no matter what, but somewhere along the line, things had changed. Julia had changed. Or maybe I had changed, and I just hadn't realized it until now. I thought about David, her brother. He had always been a source of tension between us. From the beginning, Julia had insisted that helping him was part of being a family. I'd agreed at first, loaning him money here and there, covering his rent once or twice. But the requests never stopped, and they were never small. A new car, because his old one didn't fit his image. A trip to Vegas to distress, a loan for a business idea that never materialized, and every time, Julia defended him. Made excuses for him. He's just going through a rough patch, she'd say. He'll pay us back once he gets on his feet. But he never did. I tried to set boundaries, but Julia always found a way to push back. It's my brother, Mark, she'd say, her tone dripping with exasperation. How can you be so heartless? Heartless. That word always stung. I'd spent so much time questioning myself, wondering if maybe I was being too rigid, too unyielding, but deep down, I knew the truth. This wasn't about being heartless, it was about being drained, emotionally, financially, and now, physically. I ran a hand through my hair, feeling the tension in my shoulders. Today wasn't the first time Julia had crossed the line. It was just the most blatant. The raised voices, the guilt trips, the subtle digs at my character, they'd been happening for years. But I'd convinced myself it wasn't as bad as it felt. It's just a rough patch, I tell myself. All couples argue. She's under stress, things will get better, but would they? Or had I been lying to myself all along? The sound of the faucet dripping pulled me back to the present. I straightened, looking at my reflection again. My shirt was ruined, the coffee stain spreading like a bruise across the fabric. I peeled it off and tossed it into the laundry basket, then reached for a fresh one from the cabinet. The act of changing felt almost symbolic. Like shedding a layer of myself that I didn't need anymore. As I buttoned up the clean shirt, a new thought began to take shape. What if this wasn't just about David, or the coffee, or even the argument itself? What if this was about a pattern? A pattern of me bending, compromising, and giving, while Julia took and demanded more. And what if I didn't want to keep living like this? The idea was unsettling, but it also carried a strange kind of clarity. For years, I'd convinced myself that holding on was the only option, that walking away would mean failure, betrayal, weakness. But now, standing in that bathroom, I started to wonder if holding on was the real betrayal, the betrayal of myself. I turned away from the mirror and walked back into the bedroom. Julia was nowhere to be seen, and the silence in the house was heavy, almost oppressive. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, and I picked it up instinctively. It was a text from my best friend, Ryan. We hadn't talked much in the past year. Julia never liked him, said he was a bad influence, but now, seeing his name on the screen, I felt an overwhelming urge to respond. I typed out a quick message. Hey, you busy? The reply came almost instantly. For you, never. What's up? I stared at the screen for a moment, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. How do you explain in a few words that your marriage is falling apart, that the person you thought you'd spend your life with just threw coffee in your face, that you're starting to wonder if staying is the worst decision you've ever made? Finally, I settled on a simple response. Can we talk? Ryan's reply was immediate. Of course, come over whenever you're ready. As I set the phone down, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, fear, and something that felt dangerously close to hope. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in a long time, I was starting to think about what I needed. What I wanted, and maybe, just maybe, that was the first step towards something better. I sat in the car, parked outside Ryan's apartment, gripping the steering wheel, like it was the only thing keeping me anchored. The drive over had been a blur, my mind swirling with everything that had happened at breakfast, my cheeks still tingled faintly where the coffee had burned, but the real sting was somewhere deeper, lodged in my chest. The thought of going back to that house, to Julia, felt suffocating, but sitting here, trying to make sense of it all, wasn't much better. Ryan lived in one of those modern complexes, with clean lines and bright paint, the kind of place Julia would have called soulless. Ironic, considering how hollow I felt. Walking through the front door of our own home every day, I grabbed my phone and texted him, "I'm here." A moment later, the door to the building opened, and there he was, standing in jeans and a faded hoodie, his hair still messy from sleep. Ryan and I had been friends since college, through bad breakups, late-night study sessions, and too many beers at the local dive bar. He grinned when he saw me, but his smile faltered as he got closer. "Mark," he said, his voice careful, like he was talking to someone on the edge of a cliff. "What's going on? You look like you've been hit by a truck." "Not a truck," I said, managing a weak laugh. "Coffee." His brow furrowed, but he didn't push. "Come on up." Ryan's apartment was exactly as I remembered, cluttered but cozy, with mismatched furniture, and a faint smell of coffee and cinnamon. He waved me toward the couch, and disappeared into the kitchen. Moments later, he returned with 2 mugs, and handed one to me. "I figured coffee might not be your thing right now," he said, nodding at the tea he'd brewed instead. I gave him a small, grateful smile, and took a sip. The warmth was soothing, but it didn't stop the knot in my stomach from tightening. Ryan sat down across from me, waiting. He always knew when to stay quiet, which was probably why we'd stayed friends for so long. "It's Julia," I said finally, my voice sounding foreign in the quiet room. "This morning, she threw coffee in my face." Ryan's eyes widened, but he didn't interrupt. I took another sip of tea, the words tumbling out in a rush. I told him about the argument, about David's constant demands, about Julia's refusal to set boundaries, and then, finally, about the moment she snapped and threw her coffee at me. "She said it was my fault," I said, my voice shaking slightly. "That if I'd just done what she wanted, it wouldn't have happened." Ryan leaned back in his chair, his expression dark. "That's not okay, Mark. I don't care what the argument was about. That's not okay." I nodded, swallowing hard. "I know, but I hesitated, the words catching in my throat. "I don't know what to do, Ryan. This isn't the first time we fought like this, it's not even the worst fight we've had, but it feels different now. Like something broke, and I can't put it back together." Ryan watched me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Look, I'm not going to tell you what to do. But you've been unhappy for a long time, Mark. Every time we talk, you tell me about another fight, another argument, another way Julia has made you feel like crap, and every time, you say the same thing: it'll get better. But it hasn't, has it?" I shook my head, staring down at the tea in my hands. "No, it hasn't." "So, maybe," he said carefully, "it's time to stop waiting for it to get better. Maybe it's time to start thinking about what's best for you." The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd spent so much time trying to fix things, trying to make Julia happy, trying to hold everything together. I hadn't stopped to think about what I wanted or needed in years. "I don't even know where to start," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan nodded, his expression softening. "That's okay. You don't have to figure it all out right now. Just take it one step at a time. First step, don't go back to that house tonight." I looked up at him, startled. "What? Stay here," he said simply. "At least for tonight, give yourself some space to think." Without her breathing down your neck, the thought of staying away from the house, even for one night, felt both terrifying and like a relief I didn't know I needed. "Are you sure? I don't want to impose." Ryan rolled his eyes. "You're not imposing. Besides, I've got cold beer in the fridge, and a couch that's way comfier than it looks. What more do you need?" For the first time all day, I felt a small flicker of hope. Maybe he was right. Maybe I didn't have to have all the answers right now. Maybe the first step was just stepping away. Okay, I said finally, setting the tea down on the coffee table. Okay, I'll stay. Ryan grinned, clapping me on the shoulder. Good, now let's order some pizza, watch something stupid on TV, and not think about your crazy wife for a few hours. I laughed, the sound shaky but real. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel so alone. The road ahead was still unclear, but at least I wasn't walking it by myself, and for now, that was enough. The morning light filtered through the blinds in Ryan's living room, casting long shadows across the mismatched furniture. I had barely slept, the couch proving far less comfortable than Ryan had promised, but it wasn't the lumpy cushions or the unfamiliar surroundings that kept me awake. It was the realization that my life, as I knew it, was unraveling. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of traffic outside. Ryan's snores echoed from his bedroom. A strangely comforting reminder that someone was close by. I hadn't told him everything yet. I'd skirted around the bigger issues. Kept the ugliest parts of my marriage hidden, even from myself, but after last night's conversation, I knew I couldn't avoid the truth much longer. By the time Ryan shuffled into the living room, rubbing the sleep from his eyes, I was already nursing a second cup of coffee. He raised an eyebrow at me, his messy hair and faded t-shirt a stark contrast to my tense, polished appearance. "You're up early," he said, heading to the kitchen. "Or did you even sleep?" "Not much," I admitted, staring into my mug. "Too much on my mind." Ryan returned with his own coffee, sinking into the armchair across from me. He didn't say anything. Just watched me with that patient, knowing expression he always had when he knew I was about to crack, and crack I did. "I don't know what to do," I said, my voice breaking slightly. "I don't even know where to start." Ryan leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Start by telling me everything," he said simply, no holding back. I hesitated, the words caught in my throat, but then they started spilling out, faster than I could control. I told him about the years of arguments, the constant guilt trips, the way Julia always seemed to twist every situation to make me feel like the bad guy. I told him about David and his endless demands, about how I tried to set boundaries only to have them ignored, and finally, I told him about yesterday morning, the coffee, the accusations, the look in Julia's eyes. When she realized what she'd done, Ryan didn't interrupt, didn't try to offer solutions or platitudes, he just listened. His expression growing darker with every word. By the time I finished, I felt like I'd been wrung out. Every ounce of anger and frustration poured into the space between us. "Mark," he said finally, his voice low and steady. "This isn't just a rough patch, this is abuse." The word hit me like a slap. Abuse. I'd avoided calling it that, convinced that what I was going through wasn't bad enough to warrant the label, but hearing Ryan say it out loud with such certainty made me realize that I'd been lying to myself for years. "I don't know what to do," I said again, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan sat back, crossing his arms over his chest. "You don't have to have all the answers right now, but the first step, you need help, real help, a lawyer, maybe even a therapist, someone who can help you figure out how to get out of this." I nodded slowly, the weight of his words sinking in. A lawyer sounds so expensive. Ryan smirked. "Lucky for you, I know a guy. Well, more like a friend of a guy, but he's good, handles stuff like this all the time. I'll give him a call." "Are you sure?" "I don't want to waste his time." "Mark, this isn't wasting anyone's time. You've been dealing with this crap for years. It's time to start putting yourself first." The thought was both terrifying and liberating. I'd spent so long bending over backwards to make Julia happy, to avoid conflict, to keep the peace. The idea of putting myself first felt almost selfish, but maybe Ryan was right. Maybe it wasn't selfish, it was necessary. "Okay," I said finally. "Call him." Ryan grinned, pulling out his phone. "You won't regret this," as he stepped out onto the balcony to make the call. I leaned back on the couch, letting out a shaky breath. For the first time in years, I felt a tiny flicker of hope. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep me going. When Ryan returned, he was grinning. "Good news, he can see you tomorrow morning." "I'll go with you if you want," I nodded, grateful for the offer. Thanks, Ryan. I don't think I can do this alone. You're not alone, he said firmly, not anymore. For the rest of the day, Ryan and I worked on a plan. We listed out everything I needed to do: gather important documents, secure my finances, start looking for a place to stay. The list felt overwhelming, but having it written down made it feel more manageable, like I finally had a roadmap. Out of the mess I'd been living in, as the day turned into evening, I found myself feeling lighter, like a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. I wasn't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot, but for the first time, I could see a way forward. And for now, that was enough. The next morning, the sunlight pouring through Ryan's apartment felt unusually bright, almost intrusive. I hadn't slept much, again, but this time it wasn't restlessness, it was anticipation, anxiety, dread. Today was the day I would finally confront Julia. After everything, it was time to make it clear that I couldn't do this anymore. Ryan was already up, pacing the small kitchen with his phone in hand. All right, the lawyer is expecting you this afternoon, he said, glancing at me. But first, you need to have that talk with Julia. I nodded, my stomach twisting. I'd spent all night rehearsing what I wanted to say. But now that the moment was here, my mind felt blank. How do you tell your wife that the life you built together is over? How do you end something that, for better or worse, has been your entire world for years? You sure you don't want me to come with you? Ryan asked, leaning against the counter. I shook my head. No, I need to do this alone. If she sees you, it'll just give her something else to focus on. This needs to be between me and her. Ryan didn't look convinced, but he nodded. All right, just call me if things get out of hand. I promised I would, but deep down, I wasn't sure what out of hand even meant anymore. Wasn't the coffee incident enough? The drive back to the house was eerily familiar, every turn and landmark etched into my memory, like a map I couldn't escape. By the time I pulled into the driveway, my hands were trembling. I sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. It looked so ordinary, so deceptively normal, but I knew better. Behind that door was the life I was about to leave behind. I stepped out of the car, my legs feeling like they were made of lead, and walked up to the door. The house was quiet when I stepped inside, the only sound the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. Julia was sitting at the dining table, scrolling through her phone, a mug of coffee in front of her. For a moment, the scene was almost peaceful, but the tension in the air was undeniable. She looked up as I entered, her expression unreadable. You're back, she said simply, her tone devoid of warmth. I nodded, setting my keys on the counter. We need to talk. Julia's brow furrowed. About what? If it's about David, I'm not doing this again. It's not just about David, I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. It's about us, about everything. She rolled her eyes, leaning back in her chair. Oh, here we go. Another lecture about how I'm the problem. Go ahead, Mark, get it out of your system. I took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the counter for support. Julia, this isn't working. I've tried to make it work. But it's not. The arguments, the demands, the way you treat me, it's not what a marriage is supposed to be. Her eyes narrowed, the corners of her mouth tightening. Oh, so now I'm the villain, is that it? You're the perfect husband, and I'm the evil wife who doesn't appreciate you. This isn't about assigning blame, I said, forcing myself to stay calm. It's about recognizing that this relationship has become toxic, for both of us, and I can't do it anymore. Her expression shifted, a flicker of panic crossing her face, before it hardened again. You're being ridiculous, she said, her voice rising. Every couple fights, Mark. That doesn't mean you just give up. This isn't just fighting, Julia, I said, my voice firm. This is years of me bending over backwards to make you happy, sacrificing my own needs, my own boundaries. While you take and take without ever giving back. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. Sacrificing, she snapped. What exactly have you sacrificed, Mark? Because from where I'm standing, you've done nothing but complain. Every time I've asked for help, I repeated, incredulous. You call throwing coffee in my face asking for help. Julia flinched at that, her cheeks flushing. That was a mistake, she said, her voice quieter now. I was angry, I wasn't thinking. That's the problem, Julia, you never think, you just react, and I'm always the one who has to deal with the fallout. The silence that followed was deafening. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Then Julia stepped closer, her voice trembling with anger. So what are you saying, Mark? That you're done? That you're just walking away? I met her gaze, my heart pounding in my chest. Yes, I said simply, that's exactly what I'm saying. Her expression crumpled, a mixture of shock and disbelief. You're serious? I am, I said, the words feeling both terrifying and liberating. I can't keep doing this, Julia. I need to start putting myself first, for once. She stared at me, her lips trembling, as though she wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. Finally, she turned away, her shoulders slumping. Fine, she said quietly, do whatever you want. The finality of her words hit me like a punch to the gut. But I didn't let it show. Instead, I turned and walked toward the door, grabbing my keys off the counter. I'll be in touch about the details, I said over my shoulder, through my lawyer, and with that, I stepped out into the sunlight. The door closing softly behind me, my chest felt tight, my legs shaky, but for the first time in years, I felt like I could finally breathe. I didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain, I wasn't going back. Driving away from the house was surreal. The weight of the confrontation with Julia lingered, leaving me both drained and strangely lighter. The road ahead felt uncertain. But at least it was mine to navigate now. For years, I'd been living on autopilot, putting out fires in a marriage that had long since lost its warmth. Today marked the first step toward reclaiming my life. I pulled into Ryan's driveway, my mind already racing with what needed to be done. The house might still hold my name, but it no longer felt like home. That realization hit me hard, but it also fueled a sense of urgency. If I was going to rebuild, I needed to act fast and think strategically. Ryan opened the door before I could even knock. Well, he asked, his tone cautious. It's done, I said, stepping inside. She knows it's over. Ryan let out a low whistle, closing the door behind me. How'd she take it? I shrugged, sinking onto the couch. About as well as you'd expect. There was some yelling, some guilt tripping, but she didn't fight me as hard as I thought she would. I think she knew this was coming. He nodded, handing me a cold bottle of water. That's a start. Now comes the hard part. I raised an eyebrow. Harder than this morning, Ryan smirked. Way harder. You've got to plan your next moves. Money, housing, legal stuff. You've got to make sure she doesn't blindside you later. He wasn't wrong. I took a deep sip of water and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Where do I even begin? Ryan grabbed a notebook and pen from the kitchen counter, flipping to a fresh page. First things first, finances. You've got joint accounts, right? I nodded. Yeah, but most of our money is in my paycheck. She doesn't work, so you need to protect yourself. Ryan cut in. Transfer your direct deposit into a new account. Cancel the credit card she has access to. Make sure she can't run up debt in your name. While you're sorting things out, I frowned. That feels harsh. It's not harsh, Ryan said firmly. It's smart. Trust me, you don't want to deal with a financial mess on top of everything else. This isn't about being petty. It's about being prepared. He was right. Julia had never been shy about spending, and if she felt vindictive, there was nothing stopping her from draining our accounts, or maxing out the cards. I pulled out my phone and started jotting down notes. New bank account, cancel joint credit cards, update passwords. What's next? I asked. Housing, Ryan said, tapping his pen against the notebook. You staying here for now, or are you thinking of finding your own place? I hesitated. The thought of staying with Ryan indefinitely didn't sit right with me. I didn't want to overstay my welcome. But finding a new place felt overwhelming, especially when I wasn't sure what my financial situation would look like. After the divorce, here for now, I said finally, but I'll start looking for something small, an apartment, maybe. Ryan nodded. Good call. In the meantime, make a list of things you'll need from the house, clothes, important documents. Anything you don't want to lose. I winced at the thought of going back there, but he was right again. There were things I couldn't leave behind. My passport, birth certificate, insurance documents, and a few personal items. Like the watch my dad gave me before he passed. I'll figure that out, I said, scribbling another note. Legal stuff, Ryan continued. You've got the meeting with the lawyer this afternoon, right? Yeah, I said, but I don't even know what to ask. Ryan leaned forward, his expression serious. Ask about everything: divorce proceedings, restraining orders if you need them, how to protect your assets. The more you know, the better prepared you'll be. I nodded, my stomach churning at the thought of sitting across from a lawyer and laying out the mess my life had become. But Ryan was right. This was about taking control, even if it meant facing some uncomfortable truths. What about work? He asked, glancing at me. You taking time off, or are you going back? I hesitated. My job was a lifeline, both financially and emotionally, but I couldn't imagine walking into the office and pretending everything was fine. I'll go back, I said finally, but maybe not this week. I need a few days to figure things out. Ryan grinned. You're doing good, man. This is the hardest part, but you're handling it. I let out a short laugh. Doesn't feel like it, trust me, he said, clapping me on the shoulder. You've got this. The rest of the morning was a blur of phone calls and emails. I opened a new bank account, canceled the joint credit cards, and updated the passwords on everything from my email to my online banking. Each task felt like a small victory, a step closer to independence. When it was time to leave for the lawyer's office, Ryan insisted on coming with me. You'll need someone to take notes, he said with a grin. Plus, I want to see this lawyer of yours in action. I didn't argue. Having him there made the whole thing feel less daunting. The lawyer's office was smaller than I expected, tucked into a modest building on the edge of downtown. The receptionist greeted us warmly, and within minutes, we were sitting across from a man who looked every bit the part of a no-nonsense attorney. Mr. Peters, he said, extending a hand. I've been briefed on your situation. Let's talk about how we're going to protect you. For the next hour, we went over everything: finances, assets, what to expect in the divorce process. He was thorough and direct, laying out a clear plan for the months ahead. By the time we left, I felt a strange sense of relief. It wasn't over yet. Not by a long shot, but for the first time, I felt like I had a fighting chance. As Ryan and I walked back to the car, he clapped me on the back. See, you're handling this like a pro. I managed a small smile. One step at a time. One step at a time, he agreed. And you're not alone. I nodded, gripping the keys in my hand. It was a long road ahead, but for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally moving in the right direction. The drive back to Ryan's place, after meeting with the lawyer, felt like a strange mix of accomplishment and dread. I had taken tangible steps forward, canceling joint accounts, securing legal representation, but the confrontation with Julia loomed heavy. In my mind, I knew she wouldn't take my departure lying down, and I had no illusions that things would somehow remain civil. Julia didn't lose gracefully. As I pulled into Ryan's driveway, my phone buzzed on the passenger seat. I glanced down to see Julia's name flashing on the screen. My chest tightened, as I debated whether to answer. Ignoring her would only make things worse. But I wasn't ready for another shouting match. With a sigh, I picked up and put the phone to my ear. What is it, Julia? I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. Her voice came through, sharp and accusatory. Where the hell are you, Mark? I came home and you're just gone. What's this about lawyers and canceled cards? Are you really doing this? Yes, Julia, I am doing this, I said firmly. I told you this morning, I'm done. Done? She spat, her tone incredulous. You don't just get to decide you're done. We're married, Mark. You don't get to walk away. Like this. I do, Julia, I said, my voice steady but exhausted. I do get to walk away. You made your choices. And now I'm making mine. There was a beat of silence, then her tone shifted, laced with icy resolve. You're making a huge mistake, Mark, and if you think you can just leave me high and dry, you've got another thing coming. My brother is coming over later, and I expect you to be here. I nearly laughed at the audacity. David is not my responsibility, I said, and neither is this mess. I've spent years cleaning up after him, after you, and I'm done. Don't expect me to be there when he shows up. You're such a coward, she hissed. You're abandoning your family because you can't handle a little conflict. Is that the kind of man you are? I closed my eyes, gripping the steering wheel. As I tried to keep my temper in check, "You can call me whatever you want, Julia, but I'm not coming back. Not now, not ever." Before she could respond, I ended the call and tossed the phone onto the seat. My hands were trembling. But it wasn't fear, it was anger. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence of the car wash over me. Then, finally, stepped out and headed inside. Ryan was in the kitchen when I walked in, a beer in one hand and a sandwich in the other. He looked up as I entered, his face immediately concerned. "What happened, Julia?" I said simply, dropping my keys onto the counter. "She's furious. She's accusing me of abandoning her and David." Ryan shook his head, setting the beer down. "Of course she is. She's losing control, and she doesn't know how to handle it." I leaned against the counter, running a hand through my hair. She said David's coming over later, like that's supposed to scare me. Back into the house, Ryan raised an eyebrow, and, "Nothing," I said firmly. "I'm not going back, she can deal with her brother on her own." He nodded, approvingly. "Good, stick to your guns, man. She's trying to manipulate you, and the best thing you can do is not give her the reaction she wants." I let out a long breath, some of the tension in my chest easing. I don't know how this is going to end. She's not the kind of person who lets things go." Ryan smirked. "She doesn't have to let it go. You just have to make sure she can't drag you down with her. You've got the lawyer. You've got a plan. Let her stew in her own mess." I nodded, his words settling something inside me. For so long, I'd been caught in the cycle of Julia's anger and manipulation, always trying to smooth things over. Always trying to keep the peace, but now, for the first time, I felt like I was breaking free of that cycle. I didn't have to play her game anymore. Later that evening, as Ryan and I sat on the couch watching a mindless action movie, my phone buzzed again. I glanced at the screen and saw a text from Julia. "David is here. He's furious. You need to fix this." I stared at the message, my jaw tightening. For years, fixing this had been my role in our relationship, cleaning up messes, smoothing over arguments, taking the blame when things went wrong. But not anymore. I typed out a simple response. "I'm not coming back. This is your mess to deal with." Her reply came almost instantly. "You're going to regret this." I turned off the phone and set it face down on the table. Ryan glanced over, raising an eyebrow. "Everything okay?" I nodded, leaning back against the cushions. "Yeah, everything's fine." For the first time in a long time, I believed it. The first night back at Ryan's place, after cutting ties with Julia, felt like a strange mix of relief and restlessness. I lay awake on the couch, staring at the ceiling, my thoughts racing, as I tried to process everything that had happened. The house, the argument, her text, "You're going to regret this," it all played on a loop in my mind. But for all the noise in my head, there was a tiny, persistent voice that kept repeating, "You're free now." Morning came, and with it, a sense of purpose. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew one thing. I needed to rebuild. My life was a blank slate, and while that was terrifying, it was also exhilarating. For the first time in years, I felt like I had the power to decide what came next. Ryan was already in the kitchen when I got up, pouring cereal into a bowl, with the kind of nonchalance that made it clear he hadn't spent the night replaying his life's choices. "Morning," he said, glancing up at me. "How'd you sleep?" "Better," I lied. Truthfully, I hadn't slept much at all. But I didn't want to dwell on it. "I think I need to start looking for a place today." Ryan set his bowl down and crossed his arms. "You don't have to rush. You can stay here as long as you need. I appreciate that," I said, and I meant it. Ryan had been a rock through all of this, and I wasn't sure where I'd be without him. "But I need to start figuring things out. I can't live on your couch forever." He grinned. "Fair enough. Let me know if you need help moving furniture, apartment shopping, awkward landlord negotiations. I'm your guy." I smiled, grateful for his easygoing support. "Thanks, man." After breakfast, I grabbed my laptop and started searching for apartments. It was overwhelming at first. There were so many options, and I had no idea where to start. Did I want to be close to work? Near a park? Somewhere with a view? I realized I hadn't thought about what I wanted in a long time. Most of my decisions over the past few years had revolved around Julia, her preferences, her needs, her demands. The realization was sobering. I decided to narrow it down to the essentials: affordable, safe, and within a reasonable distance. From work, the rest could come later. After a couple of hours, I found a promising lead, a small one-bedroom apartment. In a quiet neighborhood, it wasn't fancy, but it looked clean and well-maintained, and the rent was within my budget. I called the landlord, a pleasant-sounding woman named Mrs. Turner, and arranged to see the place that afternoon. As I hung up, I felt a strange mix of anxiety and excitement. This was happening. I was really doing this. Mrs. Turner met me at the apartment, a cheerful woman in her 60s, with silver hair and a warm smile. "You must be Mark," she said, shaking my hand. "Come on in, I'll show you around." The apartment was small but cozy. With hardwood floors and large windows that let in plenty of light, the kitchen was dated but functional. And the living room had just enough space for a couch and a television. The bedroom was small, but had a decent closet. And the bathroom, while basic, was clean. "It's not much," Mrs. Turner said, as I looked around, "but it's a good place to start. I had a young couple living here before, but they just bought a house, so it's available immediately." "It's perfect," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. For the first time in years, I felt like I could see myself somewhere, a place that was mine, and mine alone. Mrs. Turner smiled. "I like your enthusiasm. If you're interested, we can start the paperwork." "Today, I'm interested," I said, without hesitation. By the time I got back to Ryan's place that evening, I had signed the lease and picked up the keys. It felt surreal, holding that small piece of metal in my hand. It represented so much more than just access to an apartment. It was freedom, independence, a fresh start. Ryan greeted me at the door, grinning when he saw the keys. "Well, look at you, Mr. Independent. How's it feel?" "Terrifying," I admitted, but I couldn't help but smile. "And amazing." He clapped me on the back. "You're doing it, man. One step at a time." The next few days were a whirlwind of packing and planning. I made a list of things I needed to grab from the house: clothes, documents, a few personal items, and scheduled a time to pick them up. When Julia wouldn't be there, it was awkward and uncomfortable, but I got through it without incident. Each item I packed into my car felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. When moving day arrived, Ryan and a few mutual friends helped me haul boxes and furniture into the new place. It was exhausting, but by the end of the day, I was surrounded by my belongings, in a space that felt like the beginning of something new. That night, I sat on the floor of my empty living room, eating pizza and staring at the walls. The apartment was quiet, almost too quiet, but it didn't feel lonely. It felt peaceful. For the first time in years, I wasn't walking on eggshells, or waiting for the next argument to erupt. The silence wasn't oppressive, it was mine. I leaned back against the wall, taking a deep breath. The road ahead was still uncertain, and there was a lot to figure out, but sitting there, surrounded by the bare bones of my new life, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The days following my move into the apartment felt like stepping into a new world. One where every decision, every corner of the space, and every silence was entirely mine. It wasn't just about unpacking boxes or arranging furniture. It was about rediscovering myself in ways I hadn't anticipated. The first morning in the new place was surreal. Sunlight streamed through the blinds, illuminating the hardwood floor, and casting long shadows across the walls. There were no shouts from another room, no passive-aggressive comments lingering in the air, and no tension weighing me down. For the first time in years, I woke up without that familiar sense of dread. I made coffee and sat at the small table I had found at a thrift store, staring out the window at the quiet street below. The neighborhood was peaceful. Birds chirping, a jogger passing by, someone walking their dog. It was a far cry from the chaos I had left behind. As I sipped my coffee, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: contentment. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of adjustment and growth. I threw myself into creating a routine, something steady to ground me. Work became my anchor during the day, and in the evenings, I spent time organizing the apartment, making it my own. Each small act, hanging a picture, placing books on a shelf, buying a new rug, felt like a step toward reclaiming my independence. But the nights were the hardest. Without the distractions of work or unpacking, The silence could feel heavy, almost suffocating. Memories of Julia and the life we had built together would creep in, uninvited. I would sit on the couch, staring at old photos I hadn't yet been able to part with, and wonder how things had gone so wrong. There was grief there, mixed with anger and a strange sense of relief. I was mourning the life I thought I'd have, while also celebrating the chance to start over. One day, as I was unpacking a box labeled personal, I came across my old journal. I hadn't written in it in years. Julia always dismissed it as a waste of time. But holding it in my hands, flipping through the pages filled with my younger self's dreams and thoughts, something stirred inside me. I grabbed a pen, sat at my small desk, and started writing. At first, the words came haltingly. I wrote about the move, the apartment, the sheer exhaustion of starting over. But as I kept going, the floodgates opened. I wrote about Julia. The good times, the bad, the moments that made me realize I had to leave. I wrote about the years I had spent compromising, losing bits of myself in the process, and as the words spilled onto the page, I felt lighter, as though I was shedding the weight of the past. Reconnecting with old friends became another unexpected source of healing. Ryan had encouraged me to reach out to people I'd lost touch with, people Julia had pushed away, or dismissed as bad influences. I started small, a text here, a coffee meet up there. Each conversation reminded me of the person I used to be, before my life revolved around Julia and her demands. One particularly poignant meeting was with Sarah, an old colleague who had always been a supportive presence. Over coffee, I shared my story, something I hadn't done with many people yet. Her reaction was one of genuine concern and validation. "Mark," she said, her voice steady, "you're brave for walking away. Not everyone can do that. Give yourself credit for the strength it took." Her words stuck with me. For so long, I had seen leaving as a failure, an admission that I couldn't fix my marriage. But Sarah helped me reframe it. Leaving wasn't failure, it was survival, it was strength. As the weeks turned into months, the apartment began to feel like home. The walls, once bare, were now adorned with photos, artwork, and pieces that reflected who I was. Not who Julia expected me to be. I found joy in the small things: cooking meals without criticism, reading late into the night, playing music as loud as I wanted. These weren't grand gestures, but they were mine, and that made them powerful. The most transformative moment came one rainy afternoon at the bookstore. I was browsing the fiction section when I came across a book I'd loved in college, The Awakening by Kate Chopin. I remembered how deeply Edna's story of self-discovery had resonated with me back then. I bought the book, and spent the rest of the evening rereading it, tears streaming down my face, as I recognized pieces of myself in Edna's struggle to reclaim her identity. That night, inspired by the book, I opened my laptop and started typing. It wasn't just journaling this time. It was a story, one that mirrored my own journey, but with fictional characters and a narrative arc. The words flowed easily. Fueled by years of bottled-up thoughts and emotions, writing became my escape, my therapy, my way of making sense of everything. By the time the divorce was finalized, I felt like a different person. The legal battles, though draining, had taught me resilience. I had faced Julia's accusations and manipulation head-on, with the support of my lawyer and friends, and I had come out stronger. On the day I received the final paperwork, I sat on the couch in my apartment, staring at the envelope in my hands. It was over. The chapter of my life that had been defined by Julia and her demands was officially closed. I wasn't just free of her, I was free to be myself. That evening, I made myself a simple dinner, poured a glass of wine, and sat at my desk to write. The story I was working on had grown into something larger, something that felt meaningful. It wasn't just about my experiences, it was about hope, resilience, and the power of choosing yourself. As I typed the final words of the chapter, I leaned back in my chair and smiled. The road ahead was still uncertain. But for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what was to come. This wasn't just a new chapter in my life. It was a whole new book, and I was finally holding the pen. I raised my glass in a quiet toast to the future, to the life I was building, and to the person I was becoming. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be.